Hey, Matthew 12.
Matthew 12.
Sorry, Johnny. I think you wanted to say something at that time.
Jesus, Jesus is Lord of the Sabbath.
Okay, cool.
At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath, and his disciples were hungry and began to pluck heads of grain to eat. You just do that?
I think you can just chew it.
Okay.
I mean, if you get bread that's whole grain, whole, like really whole grain,
Uh, that's what you're eating already.
I think so.
That's not too
I
bad.
mean, it might be a little chewy, but
I mean, you do what you
if
gotta
you're
do. I'm
hungry,
sure
yeah,
they're in the wilderness.
right. And maybe not even too much the wilderness because there's wheat growing, there's grain fields,
Right. True.
so
Yeah.
there's farming. Yeah,
Oh, it's like picking a thing of corn off a thing. You don't touch.
kind of, yeah. So you're
Okay.
eating it raw,
Or an
but still,
apple or yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And when the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, Look, look at him. He's stealing. He's
Yeah.
stealing.
Or he's right. So even different than the stealing is because there was these laws that you could
Oh, it's
probably
just on the Sabbath.
it's because you're doing work. Like that's considered work on the Sabbath. That's why they're mad.
You're right. I jumped to conclusions, but it's still just as petty.
Yes, 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 exactly. Exactly, exactly. So that's what they're saying. Exactly.
He's pointing his finger. He's like,
You're
look at him.
doing work.
What was he just? Do you think he sets out a chair in the morning as the sun is rising on the grain fields to watch people, just in case they don't? And but he's working doing that. Is he not working by pointing out another's transgressions on the day of the Sabbath? I
The
mean, he is a
Pharisees,
Pharisee, so
like they're
he's
cooking
living in hypocrisy, is what he's doing in words.
because if that's right, if it's work, if that's his work to keep the law and make people obey it, then
Right.
he's
Take a day off, sir, and enjoy some of this grain with us.
yeah. Super. So let's see what happens.
But he said to them, so Jesus said this, have you not read what David did when he was hungry? He and those who were with him, and then it just starts talking, how he entered the house of God and ate the showbread, which was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only for the priests. And have you not read in the law that on the Sabbath the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are blameless? Yet I say to you that in this place there is one greater than the temple. But if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not condemn the guiltless. For the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath.
Mm, there's a lot of stuff there,
Mm.
but that's pretty cool. That so you always
So,
find new things.
yeah,
There's
you always
new
find these
things.
things. There
And
is. So in
so
3 and 4, is he saying like you're not gonna feed us because you're priests and your food is better?
so they well, I think the food was separate for the priest, but then David was really hungry and his men when they were doing stuff so that they ate the showbread. But it shouldn't have been for them, it should have been for the priest, the Levite tribe. The priestly tribe is like if you
Okay.
don't need it and you set aside the stuff, you set it aside for the church and the workers of the church, kind of like it's already given to them. Now
So
David's
David,
hungry and he's kind of taken it back in a way. It's already dedicated to God. I'm
so is
not
David
explaining.
doing the wrong thing? And I'm just, why is he bringing
Yes.
up this example?
So David did is doing the wrong thing because he's not in the priestly tribe. He's not a Levite. So he shouldn't be eating the showbread. It was only there for the priest to eat, the people that
Is
watched
Jesus
over.
but to relate
And
it to the context of the Pharisee calling out Jesus for the
oh yes.
grain, how does that?
So
Because is he defending their actions against the Pharisees' accusations?
yes, he is. and he's
So they
defending.
assume that David in this instance would be innocent.
Yes,
So
even though he's doing. So it's
he's
interesting.
lowering the priest to the level of every other man.
Hmm, maybe, maybe.
Because the
Well,
priest the priests technically shouldn't have their own food.
well, no, they should in in David's case, but I
I guess
know
in
because
David's case.
they don't right because they didn't earn a wage, so that was their wage
I
kind.
understand in this time in these laws that was good.
Right. But I think what Jesus, sorry, and you might be saying it because sometimes I have to wait and listen to you better. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're
Like
good.
I think it goes back to 7. If you go 7, it kind of explains.
Oh, it's so further. Or
Well,
have
I
you
think
not?
it explains what Jesus is saying. I desire mercy and not sacrifice, even though, like even though mercy is kind of where you don't get in trouble for
Is
doing
that
something
like to
wrong.
ask questions later?
Well, well, it's like he's saying instead of like looking at it a wrong thing, you look and see that they were hungry.
They
I
were
think so.
hungry, they needed
So you
it.
give him mercy, is it? Because he said
Instead of calling them out and saying that they did the wrong thing, they should have been like, "Hey, you guys were hungry. Did you want any food or
something like
something like that?"
I think that that might be what he's saying.
Okay.
Because he does say, which is really because this is a confirmation of what you said, right? He's justifying what they did. He said you would not have condemned the guiltless, so he's calling them guiltless, the people that plucked it.
Right.
So he's and maybe even David, right? Even
Well,
though technically
uh,
they didn't do what that law said at that time.
right. Well, it's taking the law. Like, are you gonna convict somebody who's stealing, who already has like a house and cars and all this stuff? Are you gonna convict a person stealing that has nothing and is trying to feed their family
Right.
for that?
And even the guys, they're not technically stealing, they're just doing the work. They're
Well,
just
that and then
because I
same,
don't think right.
they're hungry. So it's like
They're just
basic survival.
right. Because I think there's like they had laws with the grain. I think that people if he did it other days, he would have been they wouldn't have gotten in trouble. So only because they did it on the Sabbath. That's what I
Well,
think.
and I think this is happening now, but it could have also happened then. But like to the point where they just nitpick the laws to the
Yes.
point where nobody could do anything was more of the problem that they had. And it's more of
Right.
like what we run into now.
Right. And it's not just the Pharisees, it's, any church can do it really, or even you can do it to yourself. You can make your own rules and start
Yeah,
setting up ritual kind of things that you like you have to be careful that you're not adding laws onto stuff.
right. Yeah,
You know,
I mean, the laws that were laid out were pretty basic, and every law that's come after that was from human construction.
we get our yeah. So
Well, like the laws are based and written where people couldn't find a way past the problem,
to help them like
or like you couldn't make the other person whole. So there had to be a law to make sure,
mm,
because like the laws are there because we couldn't hold ourselves accountable with each other.
right.
Because there
Wow.
wouldn't need to be so many laws.
Oh, if we were able to do it ourselves.
Right.
But we need help. We need help, Lord.
Instead of like a
Oh,
million page law book, you're gonna
and
have
then,
like sticky notes.
yes. And then you're gonna mess up. I mean, like you even go to the grocery store to get butter and you come back with bread and no butter and you're like, boy, I messed up again.
But think about that too. Like everybody's scared of all like the cameras everywhere and like all like the government is trying to watch us and everything. But
Right.
like at the same time, we haven't held ourselves accountable.
Right.
And like these laws are in place because you can't get along with each other. So like to say
I
that
mean,
it's not really our fault.
I don't know how I feel about the camera, but then my husband says It's like, well, if you are not doing anything wrong,
Right, you shouldn't have anything to worry about.
but at the same time, I understand the privacy thing too. They could go and just put cameras where it's private. So there's also, there's
I mean,
boundaries,
I'm pretty sure it's a private institution. They can pretty much do whatever they wanted.
Yeah. Where are
Like
you talking about now? In the
anywhere really, right? Anywhere that you worked for,
Oh,
private
your work,
institution.
yeah. I thought
I
you were
mean,
talking about like in England and stuff. They have the cameras on the streets. That's what I was thinking
well,
about.
there's that,
In my
and it's
head.
it's very extensive in the United States, but like it's more institutionalized in Europe,
Yeah, like if you're
where
walking
like
Main Street in Europe, you just
every,
expect it
you're
cameras.
gonna be on camera. There's
Right.
no way. And yeah, and China as well, I know has very extensive networks of
Right, right.
cameras.
But
So it's
that's a
like,
good example of what like in your like how we can misunderstand each other because I'm thinking of the cameras in the street and you're thinking of more of a camera in a private company. And
yeah, there'd be two, yeah,
not that we were arguing or anything, but it's very easy to misunderstand what's in our heads. We need
right?
help
Yeah.
to be on the same page. We think we're on the same page, and then we weren't really,
Yeah,
in that in that thing,
it's very true. Yeah, you
It's
don't know.
cool.
That's why you gotta
Yeah,
communicate.
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 Yes. Wow. Easier said than done.
Yeah.
Yes. But I
Right.
think it's worth saying 7 again. I
Yeah.
desire what Jesus said. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. Wow. And then he's saying how the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath.
Mine is saying Hosea 6:6
Hosea 6:6. All right.
for 7.
All right. Well,
We're
we can
like
go peek at it. Let's go for a mystery.
20
Jump.
pages before.
It's, yeah, Hosea is one of the little books, the minor prophets. But we know they're not really minor, they're just minor in the number of pages they have in the book, in the Bible.
There was no child labor involved.
Yes, no minor like that. See, there's another minor that we could miss under because I was thinking minor as in less than
And they
major,
weren't they weren't
but you're thinking minor as young.
and they weren't taking rocks out of the ground either.
Oh, minor, yeah. Gold minor, metal minor, copper minor.
For I
Wow.
desire mercy and not sacrifice, and the knowledge of God more than burnt offerings. No, I read that
Mm,
before.
that's pretty deep, isn't it?
Right.
Now, if we read the whole thing, I mean, not the whole thing, but maybe 4 to 6, you can see like the context there, because this is like,
O
uh,
Ephraim, what shall
yeah,
I do to you? O Judah, what shall I do to you? For your faithfulness is like a morning cloud, and like the early dew it goes away. Therefore I have hewn them by the prophets. I have slain them by the words of my mouth, and your judgments are like light that goes forth. For I desire mercy and not sacrifice, and the knowledge of God more than burnt offerings.
so he's trying to put in perspective what's important, isn't he?
God.
Mercy, yes. Knowledge of God, yes.
I think God really wants sacrifice.
Does God want sacrifice? What do you
I
want
mean,
sacrifice?
they had it in the Old Testament as a thing that they did, like when very early on, but that was more, I think, just a sign of the times. It's like all the other religions at the time were sacrificing things, but we don't sacrifice things anymore. It's a little more taboo.
But but so if you look at it in the like there is the sacrifice which was in the Old Testament, but it's also like a vision or a prelude, maybe. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but of what Jesus sacrificed, because there still needed to be a sacrifice. So
So it's
Jesus
just an idea. But
became a sacrifice. He was the Passover lamb. So their sacrifices only covered sin, but Jesus died to
Hmm.
Like,
That would indicate to me that there was a true transgression on somebody's part.
well, on all our parts, right?
Well,
And
the need for a sacrifice.
yes, that's because we all mess up. We all sin.
Mm.
But there was a need in the daily and weekly thing where they needed to sacrifice, but Jesus became that sacrifice, but we still don't want to take it lightly.
Right.
In
Oh,
in
so he didn't have to do that. Oh, yeah. Hmm. Does
in
it
that
get more into that? Does he talk about that?
the sacrifice of the Passover.
Does Jesus talk about sacrifice?
He does talk. I think so. You mean like what I'm just saying?
At some point in the future when we'll be reading?
Oh, I think so. That's a good question. I might have to look it up so that I don't. Does he talk about doing sacrifice again? You mean?
Not that like
I'm sorry.
it's just like
Huh.
disclaimer. I don't want to do sacrifice. It's just like the idea of sacrifice just doesn't seem right for a god in me, like as an idea. So like, because for you to have to
I-
kill something else that was created by God doesn't make sense to me at all as an idea.
So it's like so.
Why would God make you kill something else that he created ever, other than to eat, which is
I,
what we had been inscribed to do?
right, right. I mean, is it because you're giving up something that's valuable to you?
Well, I understand the idea of the sacrifice, and you're taking that thing that you could have used for sustenance and you're giving that to God as a way of
Yes.
sacrificing it. And I understand how they're doing it. So I guess in
Well,
that
it's more
aspect,
symbolic than the thing because I think God, He'll take care of the.
and maybe I'm
Yeah.
not talking about Christianity. I have a lot of Mayan things going through my head right now. So maybe it's more than that. I don't understand how they got there. Well, when you have no God, I mean, you have many gods, but there's you get to some creative ideas, which you can anyways. That's the human aspect of it, isn't it?
Our human mind that can
I think
go
so.
anywhere, unfortunately, sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh, well, so should we keep going or should I read verse 7 again and have a little piece of what do you think? That
Uh,
was a
I mean, you can do that if you want. We'll read until 14 and then
okay, yeah, go ahead. Do you want to read it? Or I'm not telling you what to do. I don't mean to tell you what to do, Jan.
now when he had departed from there, he went into their synagogue, and behold, there was a man hands, who had a withered hand.
Yes, yes.
And they asked him, saying, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? They might accuse him.
So they're trying to trick him. Yeah.
Oh, and they said to, is it lawful to?
Because they're seeing if now this is all about the Sabbath, right? Is it lawful to heal a man? Like,
Oh,
is
that they
that
might accuse him. Right. I thought
because
it was more
before
of
he
it was more of a
he
trap.
he rebuked them because they plucked, because they gave the people a hard time to pluck the grain, right? Now they're trying to trick him to see if it's lawful to heal on the Sabbath. Or maybe they're genuinely asking.
Well, mine
Anyway,
says
let's see.
that they might accuse him.
Oh yeah, never mind. They're not
I did.
genuine.
Yeah, it didn't seem
They have
genuine.
yeah, you're right.
Then he said to them, what man is there among you who was who has one sheep, and if it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, would not lay hold of it and lift it out? How much more value then is a man than a sheep? Therefore, is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath? Then he said to the man, stretch out your hand. And he stretched it out, and it was restored as whole as the other. And the Pharisees went out and plotted against him, how they might destroy him. These nasty, nasty boys. They plotting.
They're plotting.
But good point, right?
I understand exactly. It is a
Do
good
you
point,
just,
right?
if your house burns down on the Sabbath, do you just not put it out? Nobody puts it out. I mean,
Right, right.
what
And
are
then
what are the
it's
laws on that?
right. You can't, if you leave it till the next day, it's going to be gone, right? If you put it out now, maybe you can save some of it.
Isn't that right, Mr. Pharisee? If your house was to catch a light, would we be putting it out on the Sabbath? Would you be asking people?
Right. And would you be right? Just like here with the sheep, which is your livelihood as well as it's a sheep, right?
But he's like,
Yeah.
you're gonna be a shitty person just because you're following the rules of God.
Right. Right. But you have to use mercy and love and
Yes,
right.
you're supposed to use.
But it's kind of interesting that he used the analogy with the withered hand, and then in 13 he said stretch. It's like, and then he was saying stretch out your hand to grab the sheep. Oh no, he
Right.
didn't say
So he could then go with his new hand.
that. Yeah. Hmm.
There's another connection.
Well, it didn't say stretch, but in my head I thought that you'd have to stretch.
Stretch out your hand.
And
Oh, for the sheep.
yeah, I remember there was, because I grew up on a farm, and there was a little there was like the ditches kind of thing, and there was a little calf, because we had mostly cows and calves, but there's a little calf stuck down there, and it wasn't like really deep, it was just muddy, but it was a bit deep, and there was these nettles, but I had to put my hand down through the nettles anyways to get the sheep, to get the little calf, and it was fine. It came up, and I had the stinging nettles, but it was worth it.
You did it. You
Yes.
suffered through it.
But I remember stretching, so that's why I thought in my head it said stretching, but it
Well,
didn't
then it's
really
your
say.
example, and it's just
Yeah,
as good as any.
yeah.
Sometimes
Super.
you gotta stretch through those nettles
I know.
to find
Yeah,
some peace.
to find some peace.